I've never liked the sound of envelopes being opened too soft, to mean anything, but always followed by something that does. The card was already out of its sleeve, propped open against the napkin holder like a paper tent. A small balloon illustration hovered in the corner with Eli turns 6 in cheerful font. The names below were clear, printed in deep blue, Mr. and Mrs. Dean, and family, that was all. My hand didn't reach for it at first. I just looked at it, like maybe if I stared long enough, the missing part might appear. Caroline's heels tapped into the kitchen. She stopped when she saw me at the counter. "Oh, it's just for next weekend. For Eli's birthday." I didn't say anything. She poured herself coffee. "It's mostly for the kids. You know how loud those bounce houses get?" She sipped and added, "You've been looking tired lately." I turned the card gently with one finger. "Not enough to leave a smudge." "I thought it might be easier," she went on. "You could relax here. We'll take pictures." There was a sweater draped over the back of the chair, still holding the shape of my shoulders. I hadn't worn it since last Sunday, but I hadn't moved it either. Travis came in, still wearing that aftershave that lingered long after he passed. He barely glanced at me, just leaned on the island and grabbed a banana. "There's going to be a photographer," he said. "Caroline's cousin booked someone." He peeled the fruit halfway. "It's going to look nice this year. Clean lines. Everyone coordinated." I stayed quiet. He raised an eyebrow. "You understand, right? Sometimes too many faces. It gets messy in the frame." I nodded before I could stop myself. Not because I agreed, but because it was easier than replying. I left the kitchen, passing the hallway mirror. There was a faint mark on the glass, like a fingerprint that never fully wiped away. My reflection stood still, not even adjusting the cardigan that slipped off my shoulder. Back in my room, I sat on the edge of the bed. The cup of tea from earlier had gone cold on the nightstand. The mug had a chip in it, just a small one near the lip, where the glaze had thinned with time. I never mentioned it. They didn't ask if I wanted to go. They made it sound like I shouldn't. And perhaps I shouldn't have been surprised. The signs had arrived in quieter ways long before that morning. The week before, I offered to make Eli's favorite cookies. Caroline had smiled, but said they already placed a bakery order. "Fewer variables," she'd said. "Guests have allergies these days." A month before that, Travis had changed the Wi-Fi password without telling me. I only noticed when my tablet wouldn't load my crossword puzzle. I'd told myself it was nothing, a mistake, a moment of forgetfulness. Now the card sat out in the open. No mistake this time. Not even the courtesy of ambiguity. I went back to the kitchen after they left for errands. The invitation was still there. I picked it up light glossy and read the time and address again. Same house. My name still absent. I turned it over and placed it face down where I found it. Then I rinsed my mug, even though I hadn't drunk from it. The hot water clouded the inside, and I watched the steam until it vanished. Later, I sat by the window wrapped in that old sweater I hadn't moved. The threads were thinning near the wrists, but the weight of it felt familiar. Outside, the wind moved the branches against the fence in soft, scraping rhythms. Inside, nothing moved. No one had said the word uninvited. They didn't need to. I watched a neighbor pull weeds from her lawn. She wore a sun visor and moved slowly, carefully, like the ground needed permission. I remembered a time when Caroline asked me to sew the hem of her dress for a school recital. She was 8. The fabric was pink and thin and tore when I tried to pin it. She had cried. I'd stayed up that night fixing it stitch by hand. She didn't cry this morning. She didn't look at me when she mentioned the photos. The sweater slipped a little more off my shoulder. I didn't pull it up. Sometimes when people remove you, they do it politely, like wiping crumbs from a tablecloth. Gentle, efficient. But the space feels colder afterward, even if no one says why. I kept my eyes on the fence. The neighbor stood up, stretched her back, and looked around like she wasn't sure what to do next. Inside, the invitation remained face down. I didn't flip it again. I already knew how it read. Some things feel less heavy when I carry them in silence. The first morning after I moved in, I folded the dish towel the wrong way. Caroline preferred it hung vertically. I always folded in thirds. I changed it as soon as I noticed. No one mentioned it, but the way the corner of her mouth twitched told me she had seen. That week, I rose before anyone else. Not because I had to, but because it gave me time to arrange the chairs just so, to listen to the hush of the refrigerator without interruption. I'd lay out breakfast with care: 2 slices of wheat toast, for Caroline cereal, for Eli eggs, for Travis. He preferred them runny. I learned that quickly. When Caroline passed me on her way to work, she'd murmur something like, "Oh, you didn't have to." I'd nod or say I was already up, or that I liked the quiet. Once I offered her an extra banana for the road. She glanced at it and replied, "Bananas spike my sugar." It wasn't a correction. It was a reminder. There was a cabinet above the stove with all the spices. I labeled the jars to make things easier. Travis opened it one evening and shut it again slower than needed. Later that night, I peeled the labels off and put them in a drawer. The house always had a low hum to it. Dishwasher cycles. Eli's cartoons. Caroline's phone vibrating on the counter. Travis pacing during his late-night calls. I tried to make myself fit into that hum. Not too loud. Not too still. I kept my shoes by the back door. I rinsed the sink after brushing my teeth. I bought new dishcloths when I saw the old ones had holes. No one asked. I never left receipts out. Caroline once came home looking worn and wordless. I asked if she wanted tea. She didn't answer, just headed upstairs. I steeped a cup anyway and left it outside her door. She never mentioned it, and the mug reappeared in the sink 2 days later. One afternoon, I was halfway through a puzzle when Travis clicked the remote and changed the channel to a football game. "News can wait," he muttered. I didn't reach for the remote again. That Sunday, I baked the walnut cake. It used to be Caroline's favorite. She'd ask for it every birthday growing up. I followed the same recipe: cinnamon cloves, a little orange zest, like she used to like. I left it on the counter with a note. Thought this might bring back memories. She didn't say anything. That night after dinner, I saw Travis take a slice. He stood over the sink while chewing, then wiped his hands on a napkin. "Dense," he remarked. "Might want to skip it next time. Sits like a brick." The knife I used to cut the cake was still in the sink. I washed it carefully, drying the handle first. Caroline cleared the plates. "You know we're trying to eat lighter." I nodded. That night, I wrapped the remaining slices in foil, placed them in a freezer bag, and tucked them behind the frozen vegetables. The next morning, I handed the bag to Mabel next door. She smiled and patted my arm. Didn't ask why. Some evenings, I sat on the porch while the family watched a movie. From where I sat, I could hear the laughter, but not the dialogue. I liked the distance. The warmth without shape. I once offered to pick Eli up from school. Caroline shook her head. "There's a system. It's easier if we keep it consistent." Later that week, she texted asking if I could pick up almond milk from the store. No note of thanks. Just a list. I brought back the wrong brand. She placed it on the counter and stared at it for a moment. "You know this one curdles in coffee, right? I told her I'd swap it tomorrow." Travis read over his email at the table while I ironed a pillowcase on the far side of the room. He muttered, "Must be nice, floating through the day with nothing pressing." I kept my eyes on the iron, smoothing the crease again. There were photo frames in the hallway. Caroline and Travis in graduation gowns, Eli at a pumpkin patch, the 3 of them at the beach. I wasn't in any of them. That wasn't strange. I hadn't expected to be. But I sometimes stood there anyway, just to see where I would have fit if anyone had looked left or right. Every few days, I bought flowers. Inexpensive ones, carnations, baby's breath. I never made a show of arranging them, just placed them in the vase by the kitchen window. Caroline once glanced at them and said, "We're not really a fresh flowers household." The next week, I bought none. I never corrected them, never asked why some people needed borders where there could have been invitations. I simply noticed. It's remarkable how many roles can be played without taking up space. Cook, babysitter, quiet watcher, even memory keeper if no one minds. I wasn't waiting for thank yous. I was waiting to feel like I wasn't a shadow someone forgot to turn off. There were no arguments, no raised voices, just that slow turning of the temperature in the room degree by degree, never sudden but undeniable. Some days the thermostat read 71. I could feel the chill anyway. I folded the laundry with care. Caroline's shirts, Travis's jeans, Eli's small socks, all stacked in perfect columns. Mine were folded last. I kept them in my room. I didn't tell anyone about the blouse I found at the thrift store still with its tag. Light blue with tiny pearl buttons. I wore it once the day of Travis's office dinner. Caroline looked at me for a beat too long before offering, maybe something simpler. I changed. Left the blouse on its hanger for months after that. It still looked new the day I packed it, but the hanger had begun to bow. Fabric holds memory even when people don't. I used to think belonging meant being needed. I was wrong. Belonging is quieter than that. It doesn't demand or explain. It's in the way someone looks for your face when telling a story. The way a chair is pulled out for you without thinking. None of those things happened. I kept doing what I could, not because they asked, not even because they noticed, but because I had once been someone who meant enough to be seen, and I thought maybe if I moved gently enough, I could be that again. I know better now. Some absences don't make a sound when they happen. They echo later when no one's speaking. At Caroline's wedding, my dress had a loose thread near the hem. I noticed it in the restroom mirror right before the reception. I didn't have scissors, so I tucked it under and hoped it would stay. I'd spent the morning steaming that dress, trying to smooth it into something more formal than I felt. My place card was on table 9. Far from the head table, near the speakers where the music pulsed too loud for conversation. I sat with her college roommate's parents. Nice enough. One of them asked if I was from the groom's side. I smiled and said I was just the mother of the bride. During the toasts, I lifted my glass, though no one looked in my direction. The photographer circled the room, clicking and posing guests. He passed me twice. I adjusted my scarf once, then gave up. Later that night, Caroline posted the photos online. There was a picture of her bouquet, the cake, Travis and his mother laughing, a group photo of just family. I looked for my dress, the one with the tucked thread, the angle cut off at my elbow. No caption, just hearts and comments. The next fall, Eli had a class performance. Caroline mentioned it the day before. "You can come if you want, but it's mostly chaos. Kids forget lines. Travis has a client call anyway." I ironed a blouse and brought a small card for Eli, a sketch of a rocket with his name on it. I found a seat near the back. Fold-out chairs. Squeaky when someone shifted. On the program sheet, my name was handwritten in blue pen, Norma Whitmore. I traced the O with my thumb for a moment before folding the paper in half and slipping it into my purse. After the show, Eli handed out small paper stars to the audience. Caroline crouched beside him, helping. When he saw me, he waved briefly, distracted by the juice box in his other hand. Caroline glanced up. "You didn't have to come, you know. It was just a school thing. I told her I liked being there." She checked her phone. "We'll probably just grab fast food on the way home." "You're good to get back, right?" I said. I was. I always was. The newspaper column came later. The local paper had an open call for short stories on caregiving. I hadn't written anything in years, but the idea of sharing what it was like watching someone you love disappear by inches felt necessary. I submitted the piece late one night, then closed the laptop without rereading it. 2 weeks later, they published it. Dignity in the Quiet Hours by Nora Whitmore. I clipped the article and placed it on the fridge with a magnet shaped like a cardinal. Caroline noticed it over breakfast. She took one bite of toast, then tilted her head toward the clipping. "Didn't know you were into writing." I didn't answer right away. She took another sip of coffee. "It's heartfelt. Bit dramatic, maybe, but heartfelt." I took the clipping down that afternoon and folded it into my recipe box. It's still there, pressed between the pages for lemon bread and apple crisp. Memory has a way of stacking itself quietly. One moment leans against another until the weight becomes something. There was the Christmas card. The year they did professional photos matching scarves, snow falling, and fake drifts. The envelope was thicker than usual. Inside the card read, "Warm wishes from the Dean family, Travis, Caroline, Eli." Underneath, in thin black ink, my name had been added by hand, and Nora. Different font. Different tone. The pen must have skipped. The ink left a faint blot just under the R. I kept the card. It sits in a shoebox with others' birthday cards, Mother's Day ones, that say things like, "Thanks for everything," but never say what everything was. Once, I tried to share a memory from Caroline's childhood. She was 8, maybe 9, and we'd made paper lanterns during a power outage. She was frightened of the dark back then. I brought it up at dinner. "Do you remember those lanterns we made out of the cereal boxes?" Caroline looked at Travis. "I think she means the time I burned toast and we lit candles instead." She moved on before I could explain. I used to believe these things were small, an oversight, a slip of memory. But even small cuts bleed when you catch the same spot twice. In a hallway drawer, I kept a tiny brass ring dish. Inside a safety pin, a stub of chalk, a button from Eli's coat that he never noticed missing, and a bobby pin. I found it on the couch one afternoon after Caroline had curled her hair for a company dinner. I never gave it back. I just placed it in the dish. Sometimes I'd open the drawer and hold it between my fingers. It still had the slight bend from pressure. Even metal remembers where it was pressed too long. People talk about being forgotten like it's a door slamming shut. I've learned it's more like a door never being opened at all. I once brought out old photo albums when Caroline was home early from work. I thought maybe she'd like to see herself in corduroy overalls, the ones she wore until the knees faded white. She barely glanced. "Everything's digital now, Mom. These always smell like basements." I didn't open that album again. I used to place importance in remembering things clearly, names, dates, favorite songs. But I've learned that memory isn't what we keep, it's what others leave space for. And when they don't, the remembering turns inward. Quiet, private, sharp-edged like folded paper. There are no raised voices in the stories I tell myself now, just pauses, gaps. And in those spaces I begin to understand not where I was erased, but how I was slowly written out in pencil. Not crossed out, just smudged. And smudges don't scream. They fade. There's a silence people use when they've already made up their minds. It doesn't ask anything of you. It simply waits for you to stop resisting. After dinner, the dishes still held the warmth of the food. I had washed each plate as I always did, placing them carefully in the drying rack. Caroline wiped down the counter behind me. I could feel her hands moving deliberate and overly precise, as if removing a layer. Travis leaned against the fridge with his arms folded. We thought it might be good to chat. Just the three of us. I turned the faucet off. He shifted his weight and looked at Caroline. The house? It's starting to feel tight. She didn't look up from the sponge. With Eli growing, we've been rethinking the space. I dried my hands on the edge of the towel. The embroidered corner caught on my ring. We want you to feel settled, Travis added, and independent. Caroline opened a folder from the kitchen drawer. I hadn't noticed it there. She slid out a brochure bright with gentle fonts and pictures of people sitting in garden chairs, smiling into sunlight. It's called Willow Glen, she said. They have crafts yoga. There's even a shuttle that takes you to the grocery store. I looked at the photo. A woman with white hair wore a sweater that looked like mine. Caroline flipped the page. They have openings, and we already called, just to ask. They were very kind. I placed the towel back on its hook. It hung crooked. I didn't fix it. I think Travis continued, you'd enjoy having your own routine again, without all of this to worry about. My chair in the living room, my cereal bowl, my folded blanket on the armrest, all of this. He set down a printout. They're expecting a visit Thursday morning. Caroline nodded. Just to see it. Nothing's final. I didn't ask when they decided. The paperwork looked smooth, no creases. Travis tapped the table lightly. Of course it's up to you. But we assumed you'd want something more your own. Caroline touched my wrist gently. You've given so much. Maybe now's the time you give something to yourself. I looked at the silver spoon resting in the sink. A faint tea stain curved along its bowl. I had used that spoon every morning for the last 2 months. We just want you to be comfortable, Travis added. Not obligated, Caroline said. The house creaked. Not from wind or footsteps, just age. Travis stood. You understand, right? No one wants to be a burden. I watched a bead of water travel from the faucet's edge, pause at the curve, then drop soundlessly. No one used the word leave. They didn't have to. Caroline gathered the brochure. It's lovely. Really? I picked up the spoon, washed it, dried it slowly, and placed it back in the drawer. Later in my room, I opened the closet and took down the suitcases. 2. Worn handles. 1 with a zipper that stuck. I kept them on the top shelf, beside an old box of photos no one asked about. The blouse I hadn't worn in months was still hanging, the tag still folded between its seams. I smoothed its shoulder and laid it flat on the bed. I packed with the sound of Travis's voice, still echoing not in volume, but in the precision of his tone. You'd be more comfortable elsewhere. That wasn't concern. That was closure. I folded the cardigan with the stretched cuff. I folded the nightgown with the missing button. I folded the silence. No one knocked. No one said, "Are you sure you're okay?" No one stood in the hallway. I looked at the edge of the doorframe where I'd once marked Eli's height with pencil. A faint smudge remained. I rubbed it gently with my thumb and left it there. The suitcase zipper stuck as always at the corner where the fabric puckered. I didn't force it, just pressed the teeth into place with the side of my nail. On the nightstand, the lamp cast a warm pool of light onto the envelope I had tucked there months ago. An old receipt folded around a short list milk toothpaste stamps. I hadn't needed the stamps. I just liked writing things down. In the drawer beside it, I kept the bobby pin, the same one I'd found months before and never returned. There was no goodbye, no conversation that needed repeating. Only the quiet of things decided in advance. I sat on the edge of the bed and pressed my hands into my lap until my fingers felt less like strangers. Sometimes what breaks you isn't the blow. It's the gentle way they pretend it's for your own good. I didn't speak. I didn't stay. I didn't argue. I packed, and I closed the drawer. Some exits don't require a door to close. They only need a decision. I left before the house stirred. The hallway light hadn't been turned on, but I didn't need it. I knew which floorboard would creak if I stepped too far left, which corner of the rug curled just enough to catch a suitcase wheel. I moved slowly, not out of caution, but out of respect for something that used to feel like home. On the kitchen table, I placed a folded piece of paper, one sentence. I smoothed the edges of the note before setting a spoon on top to hold it in place. Thank you for letting me stay. Don't worry about me. I stood there a moment longer than I meant to. The salt shaker was still half full. The grocery list from last week still stuck to the fridge with a magnet shaped like a corn cob. Caroline's handwriting curved slightly on the word detergent. I had added lemons in smaller letters underneath, almost as if asking permission. The cab driver didn't speak much. He looked at my bags, then back at me, but didn't ask questions. I liked that. The window was cracked just enough to let in the noise of tires on wet pavement. I held my tote on my lap the whole ride. Inside it a bottle of water, 2 granola bars, and a scarf I'd once bought, but never wore because Caroline said it made my neck look older. The motel wasn't far. I had seen it months ago in one of those coupon booklets near the pharmacy. The ad used phrases like extended stay and quiet location. I remembered circling it in pencil and tearing the corner of the page just slightly. Habit, maybe, or a way of marking something I wasn't yet ready to name. The woman at the front desk wore thick eyeliner and didn't blink much. She slid me a key with a room number in fading gold 7B. I didn't ask for anything else. The hallway smelled faintly of mildew and old air freshener. My room had a flickering light near the bathroom and a quilt with a pattern of small navy squares that didn't quite line up. I opened both suitcases, but didn't unpack. The air conditioner hummed steadily, its rhythm off by a breath every 10 seconds. The remote control had tape over the battery cover. The television screen was smudged in the lower left corner. I turned it off without checking the channels. The chair by the window rocked slightly if I leaned forward. I sat there and peeled the plastic wrap off a pre-packed egg sandwich from the gas station across the street. The bread was pale, the edges soft. I ate slowly. Outside, a street lamp cast yellow light onto the sidewalk, catching the outline of a crumpled paper cup someone had dropped near the curb. It shifted slightly with each gust of wind, but never rolled far. I watched it until it stopped moving. No one called, no one texted. The blanket smelled of detergent, and something beneath it like old wood left out in the rain and dried again in a rush. I didn't mind. It reminded me of basements and forgotten books. There was a nightstand drawer empty except for a laminated card about emergency exits. I ran my finger along the grain of the wood. The surface was uneven in places, but clean. Honest. In the bathroom, the mirror had a scratch near the center that ran diagonally across the reflection of my cheek. I stood in front of it and brushed my hair back with both hands. My skin looked unfamiliar in that lighting less defined, more quiet. I folded my blouse and placed it on the chair. Then I unzipped the tote and laid the scarf across the back of the bed. The scarf Caroline didn't like. I hadn't brought much. One small photo of Eli at age 4, drawing on the sidewalk with blue chalk. A notepad with half the pages torn out. A pen that sometimes skipped if held at the wrong angle. I didn't write anything. I didn't cry. I didn't even blink for a while. I just listened to the uneven thrum of the air vent, to the occasional car passing outside, to the stillness that followed the absence of voices. I used to think silence was empty, but in that room, it was full. Not comforting, not cold, just full. My wrists left slight indentations on the blanket as I sat with my hands folded loosely. The indents held their shape for a moment after I moved, like proof that something had been there. Sometimes survival doesn't arrive with banners or bravery. It arrives quietly. In the act of folding laundry no one will wear. in the refusal to answer a question that should never have been asked, in 2 suitcases and no sound. I didn't make a list. I didn't explain myself. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I didn't need to. Some things only sound like progress when you say them out loud. On paper, they're just survival in quieter clothes. The first few mornings blurred together. I couldn't tell which day was Tuesday or if the rain I heard at night had actually happened. The kettle I found in the motel's donation box hissed a little louder each day. I folded a towel beneath it to catch the slow leak. It stained in the shape of a question mark. There was a small desk by the window with uneven legs. I wedged a slipper under one side and wrote short notes in a lined notebook I picked up from the corner mart. The window faces west. I keep it closed, but I can still see the light bend when the bus goes by. I didn't write much else. Not then. The wallpaper peeled near the ceiling. The hum of the air conditioner was constant, like someone breathing through clenched teeth. My clothes hung from hooks I twisted into the drywall myself, one jacket drooping like it had lost all interest in structure. Room 9 was louder than mine. Mrs. Mabel Hargrove had a voice like sandpaper and the spirit of someone who'd survived 5 husbands and a house fire. I hadn't asked, but she'd offered that information between sips of Lipton tea she brewed in a red plastic cup. Nothing fancy. Lipton or nothing, she'd said, pressing the cup into my hand. Chamomiles for people with time to cry. Her TV played the same 2 channels. Game shows at noon, nature specials at night. Once she knocked gently and passed me a single slice of banana bread wrapped in cling film. "He's allergic," she whispered, pointing to a framed photo of a boy. Too old to be called a boy. Doesn't visit? But I bake anyway. I kept the bread on the desk for 3 days before eating it. It tasted like something left behind in a warm kitchen. By the end of the first week, I began walking the block behind the motel. There was a small park tucked between a dry cleaner and a shuttered pharmacy. One bench leaned right. The other had names carved into its slats, some dated, some desperate. A bulletin board stood near the fountain, glass cracked and sealed with duct tape. A flyer had been pinned there, slightly crooked, art for elders. No cost. No experience needed. Just curiosity. I copied the details into the last page of my notebook. Below that, I wrote, "Curiosity doesn't always survive disappointment, but it tries." I didn't go inside the rec center, not that week. I spent more time watching than doing. Watching the way paint peeled from the handrails. Watching Mrs. Hargrove water her one plant with lukewarm Sprite. Watching myself in the mirror and wondering why my mouth stayed closed even when I was alone. Laundry happened in the tub. 2 shirts, 1 nightgown, a pair of socks I patched at the heel. I used dish soap and the back of a brush. The curtain rod held more than curtains now. It held small efforts wrung out and clipped with yellow plastic pins. The smell of lemon detergent lingered longer than I expected. It reminded me of Caroline's kitchen in spring, back when she still let me peel apples for her pies. I once bought the same soap for her. She said it was too strong. Late one evening, when the motel settled into its rustling hush, I pulled out the small trunk wrapped in a pale blue pillowcase. The zipper stuck halfway, as it always had. Inside were pieces of my before self. A handkerchief with Walter's initials, a concert ticket stub from 1979, the rubber band that once bound our grocery list to the fridge door. Beneath those, I found the leather journal. I had almost forgotten it was there. My mother's handwriting looped across the cover, faint, but still intact. I had never truly read it. Not when I packed it. Not when I buried her. Not when I swore I'd never be the kind of woman who wrote for herself and no one else. I turned to a random page. She set the table for 4 even when there were only 3 of us left. I watched her unfold the napkins without asking why. Another page. If she inherits anything from me, I hope it's the silence she doesn't yet understand. I closed the journal halfway through a sentence. The binding creaked faintly. It hadn't been opened in years. Outside my window, the motel sign flickered between hotel and nothing. A moth thumped against the screen, slow and rhythmic. I returned to my notebook and added, "Tomorrow I might write more. I might draw something. Or I might just sit." All are victories of their own shape. The kettle hissed again. I had forgotten to unplug it. I reached for the cord but paused halfway, watching the red light hold steady. Somewhere in the hall, a cough echoed. Then silence again. Not the empty kind, but the layered kind, where each sound is just waiting its turn. I placed the journal back in the box, rested the blue case over it, pressed down on the zipper with both thumbs. Before turning off the light, I looked at the edge of the desk. Someone before me had carved initials there, J+L, inside a small, crooked heart. I traced it once, then rested my hand flat on the wood. I didn't need to cry, or speak, or explain. I only needed one thing to carry forward, and I found it in her words. Not the ones she wrote, the ones she left unwritten. They don't knock anymore, they notify. The first missed call came in the afternoon, just as I was drying the rim of a chipped teacup with the corner of an old dish towel. The screen lit up with her name, still saved as Caroline Dean, though I had once tried to change it to just C. The call ended before I moved. 30 minutes later, another. That evening, a third, followed by a text. "Hi, Mom. Hope you're okay. I need to ask you something." The words weren't stiff exactly, but they had that tone of something pre-written, edited for effect. No mention of where I was. No question about how I'd been managing. No apology for silence. The phone vibrated once more that night while I was folding a sweater I hadn't worn yet. I muted it without looking. In the morning, a new email sat in my inbox. The subject line, "Urgent clarification. Harlan Whitmore, documentation." No greeting, just bullet points. Please confirm legal name at birth. Current surname usage. Any legal adoption or name change post 1965. At the bottom, we appreciate your prompt attention. This matter affects family estate classification. Thank you. I closed the laptop, then turned the kettle on, even though I didn't want tea. I stirred hot water and lemon together with the spoon I'd brought from the old house, the one with the faded S carved on the handle, a wedding gift. The carving had worn smooth, almost invisible now, like a name no longer spoken aloud. The second text came that evening. "There's been some confusion with the inheritance review. Could you sign a quick affidavit? It's just to confirm lineage." Followed by a second, "Would really help. No mention of birthdays missed, no questions about doctor visits or bills or mornings alone. Just a formality masked in soft vowels." Mrs. Hargrove knocked later that night. She handed me a paper napkin wrapped around 2 sugar cookies and said, "You've had a look in your eyes this week like someone's asking too much without saying so." I nodded and set the napkin aside. I didn't unwrap the cookies. The following afternoon, a message from Travis. "We've spoken with the estate lawyer. They say verifying your last name would simplify things considerably. It's just paperwork." The phrase "just paperwork" lingers in the mouth like dry toast. I remembered without intending to how Caroline once told her friend at a fundraiser mother keeps her own surname. It's kind of her thing. Like I was an eccentric habit, a hobby. No one asked how I'd been. Not even a "have you eaten?" The questions stayed in the legal realm: borders, birth dates, inheritance rights. Not one person checked if the motel had heating or if I still wore the same jacket every day. The third text arrived the next morning. "If we can't confirm the bloodline on paper, the whole process might be delayed." This affects more than just us. Just us. I opened the old leather notebook again, the one from my mother's box. The pages crackled when I turned them. One line had been underlined in blue ink from long ago. They only write when the will gets read. I left the book open on the table and went to check the mailbox. Inside was a folded flyer from the community center offering tax prep help and another art class notice. Someone had circled acrylic for beginners in red. Back in the room, a fourth email arrived. Mom, the lawyer's asking for confirmation again. The document's attached. You don't need to do much, just sign and send back. No need to think. No need to speak. No need to be human, really. I stared at the screen. A signature. That's what I'd become. Not a person. Not a presence. Just an obstacle they needed smoothed out. Later that day, I stirred tea again with the silver spoon. This time, I didn't even heat the water, just stirred for the sake of the motion. The tarnish caught the light. No one would want it, but I kept it. Some things aren't valuable because they shine. I remembered what Travis once muttered at the kitchen table the year Harlan passed. She'll make this complicated. She always does. I hadn't answered then. I'd just picked up my cup and taken it to the sink, as if rinsing silence could clean it. This time I reached for the printed document they'd mailed to the motel address, no return name, just a legal firm stamped in block letters, a sticky note attached. Read, "We'd appreciate your cooperation, no name, not even Dear Mrs. Whitmore." Underneath the document was a small envelope, Mrs. Hargrove's handwriting. A floral card inside simple, "You're still seen." Tea on Thursday. I placed the affidavit on top of it, unopened. That night my phone buzzed once more. Caroline again. "Please, can you just sign the confirmation? The attorney says we're running out of time." I let the message sit. The screen dimmed. I watched my reflection fade with the light. I turned off the phone slowly, not out of anger, not to make a statement. Simply because nothing they needed required me to be awake. I didn't respond. And that silence, intentional hole, said everything they wouldn't hear. I didn't used to notice how my hands moved when I turned the faucet. Now I watched them tighten the wrench with a steadiness I hadn't associated with myself in years. The motel's sink had been dripping for days. I waited. No one came. Then I stopped waiting. The water stopped with a cough of old metal. I wiped my hands with a towel and folded it neatly. No applause, no witness, but something settled in my chest, quiet, like the end of a sentence that didn't need repeating. At the library desk, I organized the donation shelf while a boy with shoelaces undone whispered questions to his grandfather. I had been shelving books for weeks, never expecting anything. Then Linda, the manager, handed me a paper. "We could use a part-time clerk," she said once, not unkindly. "Someone who reads the spines before filing them." I bought a new shirt at the thrift store near 5th Street. Pale blue sleeves, just long enough. The collar sat stiff against my neck as I looked at my reflection in the dusty mirror beside the register. I touched the ends of my hair, now cut short, deliberate. The cashier said nothing about the change. I didn't explain it. In the mirror that morning, I didn't search for approval. I didn't brace for correction. The woman looking back blinked slowly, then looked down as if returning to something she had once known. Not pride, not performance, just presence. I wrote in the back pages of my mother's journal most nights. Not in her handwriting, but beside it. She had once scribbled, "People remember only what they rehearse." Below that, I added, "I remember what I chose not to say." The ink bled slightly through the page. I didn't mind. I passed by the community art class every Thursday. They kept the doors open, as if they knew someone might be circling from a distance, not ready to come in, but too curious to stay away. One afternoon, I paused. Inside, a woman with paint on her cheek was showing someone how to hold a brush like a teacup. I stepped through the doorway. My first painting was simple: a small house with no windows sitting in the middle of an empty field. I didn't explain it. When the instructor leaned over, she just nodded. "You've been thinking about that place a long time, haven't you?" I didn't answer. She didn't wait for one. The message came 2 days later. From Caroline. "I miss you. Can we meet?" It sat at the top of my phone screen while I boiled water for tea. I read it 3 times. Not once did my hand tremble. The word miss used to be a soft thing, a pull, a hope. This time it landed like a polished stone, shiny, exact, but heavier than it seemed. I poured the water, sat down, and did not reply. I cleaned out the bottom drawer of the motel desk. Tucked beneath an old brochure for a bus tour I would never take, I found the receipt from the day I moved in. The woman at the front desk had circled room 7 with a smile. Too practiced. "It's a quiet room," she'd said. It had been. The old woman in room 9. Mabel knocked with 2 fingers now. She no longer waited for me to open fully. "Tea at 4, she whispered through the door, "if you want." I went sometimes. She didn't ask questions. She had an old tabby cat who hated everyone but me. We didn't speak of that. The sky stayed gray for several mornings. The kind of gray that swallowed light without anger. I walked anyway. The corners of my jacket fluttered in the breeze, and I felt each step beneath me as something chosen, not endured. At the library, a girl asked where the fairy tales were. Her voice caught halfway as if she expected to be ignored. I pointed. "Second shelf left side. Look for the red covers." She looked back once. "Thanks, ma'am." I nodded. She reminded me of Caroline at 8, except this girl waited for an answer. Later, I folded my laundry with care. The soft shirt newly bought still smelled faintly of someone else's detergent. It no longer mattered. I laid it across the chair and sat beside it, eyes closed. The phone buzzed again. "Same number." "I know things got complicated," the message read. "But you're still Mom." I stared at the word like it belonged to a different alphabet, familiar but out of reach. I didn't type. I didn't delete. I just set the phone screen down. I painted again that night. This time the house had a door. Still no windows, but a door slightly open, just enough to show that it wasn't locked. The cup I drank from had a chip on its rim. I turned it to the smooth side and kept sipping. Some things don't need to be replaced to be usable. In the morning, I watched my reflection again. This time I smiled, no teeth, just enough for my eyes to understand it. The silence didn't feel like a lack anymore. It felt like space. Room to choose. Room to stand. And when I stood, I didn't check the mirror again. There's a kind of weightlessness that comes after everything heavy has been set down. Not relief, just the absence of needing to carry it. I placed the manila envelope on the counter of Elliot Granger's office. His assistant nodded, took it without a word, and slipped it into the drawer labeled Private Correspondence. I had written the letter the night before in my own hand. No lawyerly phrasing, no demands, no accusations. Just a clear line: I relinquish all rights to the public estate of Harlan Whitmore. No claim, no contest, no forwarding address. My signature sat beneath those words in the same ink I'd used when signing hospital discharge papers, utility shutdown forms, and birthday cards addressed to people who had forgotten my middle name. Elliot wasn't surprised. "You understand what this means, Nora?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. He slid the release forms toward me. 3 pages. A notary watched me sign. "You could have asked for a percentage, a settlement at least." His voice hovered like a moth against glass. "They might even expect it. That's how these things go." I didn't look up. My fingers folded the duplicate copy into my bag beside a wrapped piece of peppermint and an old ticket stub from the art exhibit. Later that afternoon, I visited the bank. Not the one Caroline used, or the one Travis had suggested all those years ago. This one was smaller, tucked between a laundromat and a store that sold model trains. I stood at the counter and filled out the form quietly. Change of account name. I left the surname line blank for a moment, then wrote Bennett. The clerk glanced at me. Miss or Mrs., just Nora Rose Bennett. When I handed over my ID, she hesitated, then typed slowly, carefully, as though entering someone else's freedom into the system. I hadn't used that name in decades. It was the one on the inside cover of my mother's Bible, the one she'd embroidered into the hem of my baby blanket in uneven thread. The name I dropped to take Whitmore along with the house rules, the obligations, the silence. On my walk home, I stopped by the print shop near the square and scanned the old letter from Harlan, the one folded neatly inside my mother's journal, the one he wrote before his marriage when he thought no one would ever read it. I attached the scan to an email. The subject line read, "For your records." I typed Caroline's address, attached the file, and hit send. No message, no explanation, just the evidence. In the letter, he admitted the affair. Said he never meant for it to be known, that my mother was good-hearted, but it couldn't become public. He thanked her for her discretion, for her silence, for me. Caroline would read it. She would see the date, the signature, the guilt pressed into each line, and she would know that I knew, that I had known all along, and still chose not to expose them, not in court, not in newspapers, just quietly. The next morning, the florist downstairs left a note on my door. A simple bouquet had arrived, 3 white lilies in brown paper. No card. I placed them in the jar where I used to keep wooden spoons. The stems tilted. One petal dropped. My neighbor, Mrs. Hargrove, knocked that afternoon, holding a tin of shortbread. "Someone looking for forgiveness?" she asked. I smiled without answering. She sat for a while drinking Lipton from a chipped mug, humming something tuneless, while watching pigeons gather at the edge of the railing. "I knew a woman once," she said. "Her family wrote her off. Then they sent flowers when she died. As if flowers could undo that." The silence sat between us like folded linen. That night, I opened my notebook and copied one sentence from the back of my mother's diary. "She will carry her name even if no one else will carry her." I underlined it twice. At the library the next day, I returned the genealogy books I'd borrowed. I no longer needed to trace a line through people who had spent years trying to erase me. The woman at the front desk smiled. "You always return things early." I nodded. Some things are better given back before they're overdue. As I walked past the community bulletin board, I noticed a flyer announcing a memoir workshop, limited seats, free admission, for older adults, the kind of thing I used to clip out and never attend. I took the flyer down and folded it into my bag. Outside, the wind lifted my collar. I kept walking. No court would read my letter aloud. No ceremony would mark my choice. There would be no applause for absence, no headline for dignity. But I knew what I had done. I had let go of a name that was never really mine and returned to one stitched with thread, not shame. I didn't burn bridges. I simply stopped crossing them. I didn't scream. I just stopped answering. I didn't disappear. I reclaimed my place elsewhere. And when I reached my room that night, I placed the envelope copy, the one I had scanned, into the drawer beneath my socks. Not to forget, but to remember on my own terms. I boiled water, brewed tea, sat by the window. One petal remained on the lilies. The rest had curled. The phone buzzed once. I didn't check it. I knew who it was. I didn't need them to say sorry. I didn't even need them to mean it. I just needed to stop needing it. And I had. I don't wait for permission to begin the day anymore. I move quietly now, not to avoid waking anyone, but because silence feels clean. There's no weight to it, no edges, just stillness that holds me like warm wool. The chamomile tea takes time to steep. I hold the string between my fingers, watching the pale yellow swirl into strength. I never used to notice how slow color travels in water. Now I wait for it. I let it bloom like breath returning after a long pause. This room isn't large, but everything has its place. One wooden chair that groans a little when I sit. A bookshelf with too few books and too many memories. A patch of light spills across the floor in the morning, thin and golden, like something held too tightly and finally let go. I don't pull the curtain back further. I've learned not everything needs to be seen all at once. The envelope came from Elliot Granger last Tuesday. Plain white, no seal. Just my name typed. Inside 2 documents, one confirming the finalization of Harlan's estate, the other closing the Whitmore file, my name now absent from any claims, public or private. I ran my thumb along the edge of the paper. Clean. Almost indifferent. I didn't tear it. I folded it back precisely and placed it in the drawer beside the old blue lighter I keep even though I never smoked and the gold-rimmed glasses I only use when numbers blur. On the counter sat the mug I bought from a thrift shop down the street. It has a small chip near the handle and a faded illustration of a barn owl. I chose it because the owl looks slightly off-center, as if it knows something but won't say. My hands don't shake as often now. The tea warms them. That warmth goes somewhere deeper than fingers, though I don't have a word for it. I sip slowly without glancing at the clock. Time feels less demanding when it's not wrapped around someone else's schedule. I reread a line from my mother's journal nearly every morning. The ink has faded, and her handwriting slants, as if it too was carrying weight. You don't need anyone's permission to become whole. I used to trace those words with my finger. Now I just look and remember how often I waited for permission I never truly needed. Tucked into the back of that journal is a note I wrote last night. On a square of heavy paper, I printed in small letters. If one day you find this, know that I was once forgotten but never gone. And love, if it's real, doesn't need to be spoken to be felt. I slipped it between the final pages, and a single pressed flower dried now the color leached out by time. I don't remember which bouquet it came from. Maybe that's the point. The woman who brings the mail here is younger than Caroline. She wears headphones and barely glances at the names. Yesterday, she handed me a package by mistake. I gave it back and she shrugged without apology. I offered a polite smile. She said, "You're always so settled." I didn't ask what she meant. I've stopped needing to define myself through other people's impressions. The painting in the corner remains unfinished. A pale blue sky hovers above a field that still lacks trees. I add lines when I feel steady enough to hold the brush without trying too hard. I don't erase anymore. Some mistakes belong to the canvas. Caroline's texts arrive less frequently now. Last week, miss you. Before that, saw someone who looked like you in the park. I didn't reply. I read them slowly, like letters that never learned how to land. There's no hurt in the silence, just a choice to not be pulled back. The day I went to the bank, I wore my mother's brooch, an old daisy pressed in resin. The teller didn't blink when I signed Nora Rose Bennett. She didn't ask why I was changing it, only offered a pen that didn't quite work. I pressed harder until the ink flowed. Some names you reclaim with quiet insistence. There was a moment as I left when I passed a man about my age holding his granddaughter's hand. The child laughed at something unseen. The man looked down with a face worn but open. I didn't envy him. I simply noticed. On my walk home, I stopped by the market and bought 1 apple, a tin of tea, and a notebook. I didn't need any of them. I just wanted to feel what it's like to choose without explaining. The journal sits on the table now, closed. I no longer underline or highlight. Some truths are meant to be left whole. My hands wrap around the warm mug again. Outside, the sky opens quietly. No fanfare, no need for permission. I step onto the porch. The chair there is older than the one inside. One of the legs wobbles, but I know how to sit without tipping it. The air carries no sound but the soft rustle of wind brushing past shutters. I don't lean forward. I don't look back. The world continues whether I speak or not. There is no letter left to send, no name to sign, no past to fix. Just tea and the morning light and the way I am sitting. And I am not performing this piece for anyone. I am simply living it.